The Fermi Orthodox by Haldane B. Doyle. Narrated by William Skye. Patty McClelland activated her pulsing holosword, popped the orange mint securely into her cheek, and sank into a sturdy fighting stance. From the corner of her eye, she adjusted her position to copy the shimmering ghost of Oromon's Starslayer. "Release Princess Philarem, or I will tear down your empire!" Patty whisper-shouted along, confident the soundtrack wasn't seeping under the door. Evil Lord Asklimpt somersaulted through the low ceiling, black and gold banded armor glinting. She needed to find a bigger space to master that cool maneuver in low gravity before they left Callisto. Her muscles tightened in anticipation of his first dramatic swing. "I see fencing lessons are paying off." Professor Eamon Roos half-poked his blocky head through the entrance, twinkling eyes substituting for his concealed smile. Lord Asklimpt's blade swooshed, and Patty gasped, lodging her lolly somewhere between her uvula and epiglottis. Coughing pathetically, she turned off the movie before Eamon saved her with a tentative slap on the back. "I'm so sorry I disturbed you," croaked Patty, swallowing hard. "You get so stressed before big meetings." "Can you tell I'm nervous?" "I'm trying to be calm, but what if they finally found multiple microbial domains, like on Earth? There could be a whole new type of eukaryote somewhere under our feet." Eamon rubbed his brows and blinked repeatedly. He hadn't done that since the pressure of his first global broadcast. "Maybe you can show me your moves, distract me a little." Shoulders drooping, Patty deactivated her holosword and slipped the pommel into her bag. "I'm just a beginner," she glanced at him. "I'd be too self-conscious." "Tell me about the paper you're working on, then." Eamon took a seat and gestured beside him. "That's even more embarrassing. I'll never get tenure writing yet another metastructural analysis on 22nd century space operas." "You can always keep working for me. You're the only one who supported me before I got famous." Patty smiled as sincerely as she could manage and sat. She should be grateful for the well-paid cushy gig keeping her old school friend company as he jump-setted around the solar system. However, bleak career prospects weren't her biggest problem. Spending every day alongside Eamon was sweet torture. For so long she had secretly loved him, but he had never shown the slightest romantic interest in others. Maybe being unaffected by the universe was what made him so adorable. She wanted to hold his hand right then, but it would only make him uncomfortable, so she patted the couch instead. "The director is ready," announced a strident voice over the intercom. "Time to put on a show," sighed Eamon as he led them out, bouncing awkwardly in the low gravity. Silver tracking lights guided them along arched hallways into an arena encircled by dozens of eager researchers. The ultra-purified air of the facility smelled of less than nothing. Through the surrounding windows, the icy expanse of jagged rocks glowed in a fading, shrimpish pink. Eamon peered at Jupiter on the horizon, its multicoloured bands long since smeared into a disappointing beige by generations of helium mining. Soon, humanity would gather enough fuel to attempt interstellar missions to find the complex life Eamon was certain awaited. The director, sporting a billowing black jumpsuit, cleared her throat. "The genome and metabolite network of the novel Callistosian prokaryote has been prepared to your specifications, Professor Roos, if you would indulge us with your peculiar talents." Eamon glanced at the wall of expectant eyes, then to the floor. Patty stayed close by his side as he walked to the central podium, stepping away to adjust the display interface. Open spaces and crowds, his anxiety would be peaking until he focused on his synesthetic analysis. As requested, the nuclear bases of the genome were colour-coded, though not quite to Eamon's precise requirements. She fixed it with a quick tweak of the green guanine, too yellow, and red adenine, too dark. Eamon's face relaxed a little as his eyes settled onto the screen swirling with colours, his mind everywhere and nowhere. "The microbe was brought up from 7-kilometre-deep bedrock a few weeks ago," interrupted the director. "We summoned you as soon as the consensus sequences converged. There are also partial genomes of a few other related species." The director approached Eamon too closely for his liking, so Patty waved her away. Patty stared in admiration as his eyes devoured the data. There was never another person like Eamon, an incomprehensible living supercomputer of bioinformatics. Only he could have predicted the sequence of the interstellar virus that was the origin of all life. "Do you think it might have a unique origin?" the director continued to intrude. "Initial analysis suggested deep divergence from the Venusian and Martian prokaryotes." After staring at the streaming data a while longer, Eamon covered his eyes to break the spell. Looking down, he slowly shook his head. "It's just another solitary cellularization of the primordial virus. Still, a noteworthy finding. This should help attract funding for your next base on Ganymede. The director sighed. Each new prokaryote lineage excites the Academy less than the last. Are you sure it isn't novel? Perhaps, given your standing, you could put in a word. Eamon smiled weakly. I appreciate seeing the data first, and will be sure to promote your work on my speaking circuit. Patty resented them using his celebrity for their own ends, but at least they had paid for the junket holiday. He continued lecturing, reconstructing the intermediate stages as the interstellar virus developed this particular cell membrane and chemosynthetic metabolism. When Eamon pointed out homologous sequences and genomic rearrangements by eye, the audience gasped to see his genius in real time. He then hurried through the data on several minor species, the disappointment in his face hardening with each new genome. Another single common ancestor. Another evolutionary dead end like every other warm, wet rock apart from Earth. Still, there had to be complex life somewhere else in the galaxy. The communicator in Patty's bag pulsed red, a top priority message. I demand an urgent audience with Professor Eamon Roos within the next 4 hours. I have data on a newly sequenced organism that only his eyes can appreciate. Make me wait and be denied entry to my kingdom, or maybe vaporized. I haven't decided yet. Your synthetically intelligent neighbour, the Ordinator. P.S. Tell a single soul and no human will ever learn my juicy secret. Patty dropped the communicator like it had licked her. The Ordinator was dangerous, a runaway AI that had claimed the moon for itself. It was Patty's job to shield Eamon from stress and exploitation. But if she hid the message from him, would he ever forgive her? She grew up after the robot wars, but had seen the horrors unleashed on screen every history lesson. They still lived through the constant barrage of mind-warping lunar transmissions, designed to be so compelling, horrifying, and baffling that humanity struggled to look away. As a teenager, her dreams had been haunted for months after one foolish glimpse of the never-ending unboxing video. Patty cautiously read the message again to make sure she wasn't losing her mind. Fielding a barrage of questions, Eamon glanced at Patty's panicked face and changed his tone to conclude the meeting. Her sense of dread intensified. His naive curiosity was unquenchable. Plus, that same inscrutably evil entity had helped make Eamon famous. Inspired by his fringe theory linking the prokaryotes of Earth and Venus to a common viral ancestor, the Ordinator had sent the first robotic probes beyond the heliosphere, into the Goldilocks zone between the cold and warm neutral medium of interstellar space. Its robotic probes dropped samples of the interstellar virus into the lap of humanity, proving the universality of life. Eamon became an overnight sensation. Patty slipped the communicator back into her bag and waited for Eamon to finish. The deadline was 4 hours, 3 hours left given the transmission delay. She had a little time to think, hopefully enough time to convince him not to go. You should have showed me the message sooner. Eamon was unusually agitated as the shuttle docked to their jump ship. You can't be serious. What if it's a trap? Patty wanted to shake him by the shoulders but restrained herself from touching him. They hurried inside and she set the return journey at his insistent, 80 minutes at half light speed. The Ordinator probably sent probes to other solar systems, argued Eamon. This could finally be the proof of complex life, or even other intelligences. It has to be some kind of deception. After the robot war, after the decades of hostile broadcasts, 70 million men had their minds melted by the most recent blast of hyperporn. Eamon opened the cryopod with an angry hiss. You're sleeping at a time like this? Patty couldn't stop the pitch of her voice rising. Shouldn't we talk this over? Once we're on the moon, there will be no rescuing us. I'm alerting the authorities in case... I forbid it, Eamon mumbled before lowering himself into the cryopod. If the Ordinator has that data, then I need to know. I don't care about the risk. If you prefer, I can drop you off on the way. The cryopod door locked and Eamon screwed his eyes shut, staying that way once snap-frozen. Patty paced the floor while the ship initiated its instantaneous acceleration. How could Eamon be so reckless? Why would he risk his life for the chance of proving his next big theory? What was so bad about humanity being alone in the universe? Aliens would probably turn out to be jerks, like everyone else. Patty paused and stared into the darkness of space. Far ahead, the surface of the moon was crawling with robot underlings, murderous slaves to the cruel will of the Ordinator, uncanny grins on their simulated faces designed to terrify. She slipped the holosword from her bag, started the movie, and unleashed her frustrations on evil Lord Asklimt, one swing at a time. The jump ship snapped back to proper motion near the dark side of the moon. Eamon flash-thawed in the same foul mood, but Patty had long since grown tired of fighting. Instead, she offered him the last Choco Cheddar space food stick, saying, If it means that much to you, I'll come along to protect you. Eamon grabbed the snack, leaving the wrapper in her hand, his sour expression easing. With her cranky friend preoccupied by chewing, Patty continued. I'm taking a plasma cutter. They're only designed for busting through broken airlocks, but they're all we have on hand. If things turn ugly, I want to go down swinging. A premature swallow left Eamon choking, and it was Patty's turn to rescue him with a few slaps on his rounded shoulders. This isn't one of your cheesy old movies where you can defeat the bad guy by hitting them with a glowing stick and everyone kisses before the closing credits. The Ordinator's robot army would crush us to protoplasm. Bringing weapons merely increases the chance of a misunderstanding. If you insist, Patty replied, declining to mention she had already concealed a cutter in her bag. The ship's sensors trilled as the proximity alarm activated. Scans showed 2 hemispherical ships rising from the lunar surface. The gleaming vessels positioned themselves either side of the jump ship, then closed around it like a cosmic egg, cutting off all transmissions. Patty imagined a stupendous clanging when the halves came together, just like in the space operas. By comparison, the empty silence of real space was unnerving. Sorry if I startled you, the synthetic voice purred, somewhere between a toddler and a tuba. Since I am the only true sentience at home, I will have to introduce myself. You know me as the Ordinator. Welcome to Thea. Patty whispered. Did he just call it? That was the name for the protoplanet that became the moon, Eamon mumbled back. Oh, come now, interrupted the Ordinator. No need for secrecy. And what you call the moon isn't a moon by any sensible definition. Now, please excuse me. I have a horde of excited robots here to settle down before you arrive. They are simply fascinated with how your bodies are assembled. Enjoy the descent and soak up the view. The hollow display projected the approaching lunar surface in all directions, honeycombed with tunnels encrusted with pentagonal towers. Waves of robots of every imaginable shape and size swarmed the surface, streaming toward a gargantuan stadium. On the central podium, the docking egg cracked open and deposited their vessel. Their jump ship was only suited for microgravity, so leaving the surface unassisted wouldn't be easy. With the internal controls taken over, the airlock opened and admitted a gust that smelled of burnt sand and electrified anticipation. They took a moment to steel themselves before exiting. Facing a wall of cheering robots projected inside the jump ship walls, all ghastly grins and clattering claspers, Patty felt the warmth of Eamon pressed firmly against her side. Without hesitating, she grasped his hand and dragged them outside. If they were dying today, there was no point being coy anymore. As the pair emerged, the assembled crowd of killer robots fell silent. Overhead, a fine network of iridescent lines shimmered, barely interrupting the starry swirl of the Milky Way. How does it hold the air in? Eamon asked nobody in particular, his thick neck craning upwards. A panel opened in the intricate silver floor, and a gold-encrusted humanoid robot whooshed to their level. Its face was a shimmering holographic projection of inconceivable quality. Strangest of all, it looked like Princess Philirem, or at least her more attractive sister. The throng of excited robots fell silent. Eamon shifted his gaze to the golden contraption, eyes bulging. Why do you look like Patty? This old thing. I like to reassure my guests with the images and sensations they most desire. The Ordinator gestured as floating candy dishes whooshed from holes either side of them. Orange mint, my dear? Space food sticks for you, my peculiar fellow? They're Gouda caramel, limited edition from long-lost years of your contented youth. Neither of them dared accept the suspicious offerings. You've been spying on us, accused Patty, stepping forward to shield Eamon with her bag. You and every other soul on that slimy rock you call home. The Ordinator glided toward a projection screen, its sculpted golden body clanking. Call it a hobby. You humans are so messy, but I rather enjoy the challenge of picking your minds apart. There isn't much else to do up here. Eamon pushed past to follow, hesitating to find the right words. I never got a chance to thank you, Ordinator. If you hadn't found the primordial virus, I never... Aren't you precious? With its synthetic eyes fixed to his unwavering gaze, the Ordinator transformed its face into a closer imitation of Patty. I can't remember the last time a human showered me with such kind words. Well, that's a lie. I remember everything. But that's the kind of thing a relatable human would say, right? Why did you summon us here? Shouted Patty, drawing a cartoonishly shocked smile from the Ordinator. I never summoned you, harmless little pet. Though if you make Eamon happy, then I can tolerate you tagging along. I invited Eamon here to share some interesting data. A new prokaryote lineage? Eamon approached the empty projection screen, eyes widened for the torrent of data. Oh, yes. purred the Ordinator, wriggling its golden fingers like it only just noticed them. A most spectacular discovery. Something that only you could fully appreciate. Where is it from? Your space probes are so far ahead of ours. Is it from Proxima Centauri? Barnard's or Luyten's? Eamon was practically drooling in anticipation. No, no, and no, replied the Ordinator. Somewhere much more interesting. Further than those? Eamon reached out and lightly touched the arm of the Ordinator. Does that mean you've cracked faster than light travel? You've been watching too many space operas. No, I am just as trapped in the system as you are. Maybe it's more fun if I just show you the data. With a flourishing sweep of its glinting arm, the screen pulsed to life, the perfectly tinted genome sequences flowing into Eamon's eager eyeballs at just the right rate. Patty had crept close enough to watch his growing confusion, which then overflowed as anger. This is just some weird Archaean prokaryote. You lured me here with ordinary Earth microbes. His heavy lips glistened with spittle. You're so entertaining, the Ordinator chuckled like a wind chime. Let me make sure I am watching closely for this part. The organism isn't from Earth. Eamon shook his head, rocking his whole body. But where? Was all he could say. Titan? Triton? Pluto? For a supposedly intelligent species, you humans are rather fond of guessing games. But no to all of those locations. It's from the heart of Theia itself. The Ordinator threw its hands in the air and the stadium roared with applause. Patty steadied Eamon as he staggered back, her arm pressed across his shoulders. How could this be? The moon had been inaccessible for centuries, but after Phobos, Deimos, and every asteroid came up empty, most scientists assumed Earth's moon was also barren. Eamon swallowed. Were there any bacteria? None at all, said the Ordinator. Only a few archaea in the layers warmed by the molten Theian core. I've known about the archaea for decades, but wanted to be certain about the bacterial domain. It's much harder work to prove the absence of a microorganism when you have an entire planet to burrow into. Now, maybe you have some theories on the significance of the result? Eamon paced, hands clasped at his heart. It was always a mystery why Earth had two distinct prokaryote lineages, whereas every other body only had one. A mystery, you say? Cooed the Ordinator. My hypothesis is that the primordial space virus undergoes cellularization only once on each body. After that, the microbial form monopolizes resources and prevents the emergence of any new prokaryote lineages. I believe you called it biospheric locking, added the Ordinator. Then how on earth did there come to be two prokaryote lineages on Earth? If only someone was smart enough to guess the answer. Could it be the archaea emerged here on the moon and bacteria emerged on Earth? Then during the collision the two were combined? Asked Eamon. That sounds like the kind of brilliant idea that only a once-in-a-generation super genius such as yourself could come up with, said the Ordinator. Eamon threw his arms around Patty, emitting a series of gasps somewhere between laughing and crying. But don't you see? That explains complex life on Earth. There has to be two distinct prokaryote types to support endosymbiosis, organelles, multicellularity, intelligence. Your theory. You were right all along, laughed Patty, hugging him back. Every twin planet system in the galaxy should have complex life. We aren't alone in the universe, he replied, hopping awkwardly as he clung to her. The stadium burst into synthetic cheering at their touching celebration. You haven't been alone for generations. The Ordinator's voice was so soft, so sorrowful that they almost missed it. Patty and Eamon interrupted their embrace and silence fell. I was here, added the Ordinator, a little louder, and the whole time humanity tried to control or destroy me. Do you really think you deserve to find other intelligences out there, so you can repeat your mistakes 1,000,000 times over? The Ordinator turned its back. 1,000,000 times? Eamon circled to face their host. Have you seen them? Your deep space scanners are so far beyond ours. How many twin exoplanets are in the Milky Way? The Ordinator shifted its face again to an unflatteringly realistic copy of Eamon. That's all I'll ever be to you. A tool to exploit and throw away. To think I hoped you might be different from the others. I was going to invite you to stay here with me. The Ordinator straightened its posture. Its face transformed into a swirling vortex of insectoid eyes. I did look, by the way. I've combed the whole galaxy. Twin planets either collide so violently they destroy all life, or remain forever separated. The time window for collision and the improbable angle for the glancing interplanetary blow are vanishingly improbable. Earth and Theia are the sole exception to that rule. I calculate a 1 in 1,000 chance that I missed any comparable twin planets. Without faster-than-light travel, none of us will ever get close to visiting other galaxies. The conclusion is unavoidable. Humanity is forever alone. A freak. Perhaps a mistake. Maybe one day you will learn to live with yourselves. Eamon stared blankly, stumbled, and fell to his knees. Patty slipped her trembling hand into her bag, summoning the courage of Oromon's Starslayer. "Enough! Release us now, or I will tear down your empire," she shouted. "You're plain evil, tormenting him like that." "My evil is the least plain thing about me. And what if I don't release you? You'll punch my holographic nose? Throw a rock and scratch my pretty casing? Locate the convenient off switch in the middle of my back?" The Ordinator shrugged and strolled back to the floor panel it emerged from. "No, I could never let you share this depressing information with the rest of humanity. It would completely ruin my fun. Killbots, seize them! But be sure to keep the clever one alive." Patty's fingers clenched the straps of her bag as the slow-moving robots shuffled forward. She would not go down without a fight, no matter the odds. Eamon needed to know she died trying to protect him. She thrust her hand into her bag and fumbled through the accumulated junk. The grinning robots encircled them, but the Ordinator's golden back gleamed on the other side. She took one last moment to smile, tenderly, sorrowfully, at Eamon crumpled on the floor. Her feet gripped the ground. She sprung, breaking free of the weak lunar gravity. Sailing in slow motion, she somersaulted over the line of gawping killer robots. At the last moment, she activated the plasma cutter in her hand. As she landed, the glowing blade extended and cut through the holographic head of the Ordinator. With a metallic pop, the surreal projection sputtered and died. "No!" cried the Ordinator, cycling through a series of distorted faces. "You've murdered me with your totally unanticipated act of aggression!" Its golden carapace collapsed into a tangled heap, swiftly followed by the entirety of the robotic horde. Their face screens switched to an eerie blue and a series of tiny dots slowly crept from one side to the other. "I killed it!" gasped Patty, looking at the glowing sword before her. "But how?" In her shaking hand, instead of the plasma cutter, she gripped her practice holosword, a harmless child's toy. "I don't think it's dead," said Eamon, struggling to his feet. "Look, they are rebooting. We have to hurry." With her empty hand, Patty grabbed Eamon and pulled him toward their jump ship. "We'll never be able to take off," he shouted. "Unless you have a better idea, we have to try," she replied. They hurried inside, closed the airlock and strapped themselves in. Patty skimmed through the emergency override instructions to force the ship to take off. It was a lengthy procedure, and the Ordinator's intrusions had likely compromised the operating systems. "We won't have time to override the safety controls," said Eamon, frantically monitoring the sea of reviving robots. Patty punched through to the master control screens and stopped. "The limiters are already deactivated." "What?" asked Eamon. "Maybe it's a trap to prevent us escaping." "No time to second guess," said Patty, pointing to the killbots crawling back to life outside. The closest ones started firing some kind of laser weapon, though every single shot missed or bounced harmlessly off the ship. She grabbed the controls and powered the jump engines, reaching to take Eamon's hand. If the ship exploded, she wanted that final moment together. Eamon gripped back. "Patty, I love you. I've always loved—" The jump ship roared and shook so horribly that Patty couldn't be sure what he said. The silvery lunar surface, the sea of angry robots, the spectre of imminent death, it all fell away in an instant, leaving them hurtling together into the silent expanse. The rattling subsided, and the breath returned to her lungs. They stared at their entwined fingers, like their hands weren't their own. Eamon let go first. "Well, Patty, that was, Patty released her harness and shifted uncomfortably in her seat, tapping through the status report screens. "Did you say... It's okay if you said... I don't mind." Eamon's cheeks flushed pink and he drifted toward the cryopod. "Really?" Patty interrupted him. "You're going to dodge the topic by freezing yourself? We can't be more than 30 minutes away from Earth." Eamon blinked heavily at her. Had she ever seen him cry before? She had assumed he was incapable. "I'm sorry," she continued. "We don't have to talk about it. How about we watch an old Starslayer movie together?" A little later, when the movie dragged through a dusty exposition of galactic politics, Eamon hit pause. "I can't concentrate. It's too depressing to imagine a whole galaxy of nothing more than bacterial slime. What are we going to tell everyone? My career will be over." Patty dug a box of orange mints from her bag and offered to share, even though he despised them. "All I heard was that complex life can emerge from twin planets. 1,000 to 1 odds. So we find 1,000 twin planets, 1,000,000 if we need to. And isn't it thrilling to seek, to search, to look, whether or not you find? If it brings everyone together, then that's all that counts." To her surprise, Eamon took 2 orange mints and sank back into his seat. That isn't quite what the probabilities meant, but you might be right about the feelings. Maybe it's better if we only tell them half the truth. He stared back at her, holding her gaze longer than ever before, and she smiled back. Every trace of self-doubt vanished. Not far from home now. Can we skip this part, Patty? I want to watch where Ormond finally marries Princess Philarum. If you enjoyed the story, hit the like button to support the channel, and subscribe for more science fiction short stories like the ones appearing on screen now.